What's up?
Hey, Black. So I put the TeamViewer link up in the training channel. Actually, I'm not sure how many people can join my TeamViewer. So Jambo, maybe you can put your streaming link also.
No, I'm not able to join.
Yeah, I would. The only way I could, yeah, I would have to be able to join and then have it streaming as well.
Yeah, so make sure that you're able to get in so you can stream.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, I can only have 5 people join. I forgot about that issue.
All right.
So if one person can come out and then Jambo will stream it and send the link. I'll also be recording it, so we'll all be putting the video of it up after for future reference.
All right.
I backed out.
All right, Jambo, go ahead and try streaming so we can see if it's working well.
Okay. It should be. All right. I don't know why this is.
Do you have a link somewhere?
Yeah, it's somewhere. Hold on. I'm still trying to figure this whole thing out. So you can try going. I'll put the same link here where Zeke put that. See what happens. Now I got to get into your team viewer. All right. I just have a black screen, by the way. Your team viewer shows black. There it is.
There it is.
Is it chirpy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll move that. I gotta get out of that meeting because I'm hearing it keep on going over and over. All right, so it looks like the streaming is working. Is that right?
Has everybody clicked on the link yet?
We're supposed to be doing it in TeamViewer or?
Either one. If you can't get in TeamViewer, then you just have to go to the streaming link.
Okay.
It'll be a little bit behind. It looks like it's looks like about a 5-second delay. So you might want to either mute me here in Discord or you'd have to mute on there, but you'd be hearing it with a bit of a delay.
Can we all just listen in Discord so we're all on the same 5 seconds page?
Yeah.
And now I heard myself again.
Yeah, just mute your Twitch stream.
How do you do that?
Down at the bottom, there should be a mute button at the bottom left of this Twitch page. It's not that big of a delay, by the way.
Or you can go into your Windows sound. You can open up your volume mixer and you can mute the individual application. And so you can just mute the Twitch application.
Zik, just wait because everything you're saying, everything everybody says is transmitted twice.
I know that's what I'm saying. You have to mute it.
Okay. Just open up the Twitch in full screen mode. At the very bottom left, you'll see a little speaker, click on that and just hit mute it. Simple.
All right, so let me know when you guys are ready to start. I'm gonna jump down to. I don't want to go to the classroom because classroom doesn't show up on the web page. So let's go to the 70-second members briefing room.
Can somebody drag me? Because I don't want to change my screen because of the stream.
All right, so I think everybody's in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start recording. We're gonna start.
Can you drag me to the right channel?
You're on the right channel.
Okay, good. Thank you. Can you hear me?
All right. So yeah, to get started, this is basically going to be going over the mission commander and kind of the uses I use it for. It's not all the uses for it. I'm sure some people that are more familiar with it than I am may have other ways of using it for other things, but kind of just wanted to go over how to use it for creating missions in the campaign engine. It can also be used for some other stuff as well. So we'll touch on the most common way that I use it, and then also kind of how it's used to create the 70-second VFW world to maybe spark some ideas in other people. So basically, the purpose, like I say, just want to try and educate everybody on the use of Mission Commander, since it seems like a lot of events that we do are held in the TE environment, where with a little bit of Mission Commander knowledge, it can be very easily put into a campaign engine and reap some of the benefits of that campaign engine. And also to hopefully get some more mission developers here in the 70 seconds, so we got more people creating missions. And then, like I say, to hopefully have all of our events that we fly on the 70-second be in that campaign engine as opposed to the TE engine. Because right now, currently, we have, flight nights that are not on the 70-second world. A lot of guys will create those in the TE environment. But like I say, making those in the campaign can make them a little bit better. And open flight nights, LFEs, and any force on forces, I think all would work better in the campaign environment than TE environment. So what's the purpose of Mission Commander? I mean, basically, Mission Commander, my understanding, was essentially created to replace the existing application that was used to modify campaigns and TEs, which was TAC Edit. So TAC Edit used to be used to do a lot of the things that Mission Commander does. TAC Edit might still be used by some people, but I think Mission Commander, for the most part, has replaced most of its functionality. I never was too familiar with TAC Edit myself, so I can't explain too much about it. But it definitely Mission Commander made it a lot easier to do things that TAC Edit could also do. So basically, with Mission Commander, we can modify existing campaigns, we can modify existing TEs, and we can also modify existing training files as well. And then we can also create new TEs external from BMS. So rather than being in BMS, creating those TEs, we can create those TEs here in Mission Commander. And then also we can create new campaign scenarios in an already created theater. So you just got to make sure you understand the difference between a theater and a campaign scenario. So that the theater is like KTO, for example, that we fly a lot, or DPRK Strong, or BMS, or sorry, not BMS, Balkans, or any of those other theaters that the theater developers have created. Within those, there are pre-built campaign scenarios. Now with Mission Commander, we can modify those existing campaign scenarios to modify them how we want to use them if we want to do something different than what they've set up already. So then just to go over the basics of the Falcon files, it's kind of good to understand. So like I talked about already, there's the theaters, which are KTO, Balkans, Israel, and so on and so forth. Within those, there are TEs and campaigns, essentially. And we're all familiar with, TEs and campaigns, I think. But there's also the training files also that are associated with the theater. Those TE files, we have what the blank one is essentially is the TE underscore new file. So if we come into Mission Commander and come down to TAC, we can see the TE new file. Essentially, that's a blank TE file that BMS would create a new TE starting from. Similarly, in campaigns, there's the base campaign file for those campaign scenarios, and those are the save X files. So if we filter it by the campaign files, we can see the save files. So there's save 0, save 1, save 2. And these are the 3 custom scenarios that are created for whichever theater we happen to be in. So because we're in the data campaign save directory, in this case, these save 0, 1, and 2 are the KTO campaign theater or scenarios. Save 0 is the basic one where, it's north and south sides are essentially at the DMZ. I think save 1 might be where it's that small section down, and save 2 might be the one where South Korea has more control of North Korea. But those are the 3 initial ones. In addition to the basic files, then you have the campaign files that are saved when you save a campaign, and those are also cam files, but they're whatever name you've named them from the time that you've created essentially a starting campaign, and then you saved it. Those are the names that you have. So those are the files in BMS that Mission Commander will use and work on. So then to open up those CAM files and TE files in Mission Commander, it's just as you just saw. Basically, you can come up here once you open up Mission Commander initially, I should say. You can come up here, File, Open, and then you can pick what it is that you want to open up. So if you wanted to open up, that save 0, we can open it up and it'll load all that information. Now, one thing that's important to remember is you want to make sure you back up. So if you're going to be modifying your save 0, save 1, save 2 files, you want to make sure you're backing those up, and also your new underscore TE file. Make sure you're backing those up, because those are if you mess with those, you basically can't really get back to the base install essentially of the original scenarios. So make sure to back those files up before you start modifying them. And you don't have to modify those as well, right? You can always just create a new one, rename it to something, and then that's what you modify. So in this case, we open up the save 0, but you can also just go into any CAM file or any TE file and just open it up, and then you don't have to worry about that as much. There are some restrictions on some certain things that you can do, whether you're in the save X file or not. We'll touch on one of them a little bit later once we get into to that section. But just keep that in mind, that there's a little bit more that you're able to do when you're working in that save X file. So we'll go ahead and open up the save X just for demonstration purposes as we go through kind of Mission Commander. So the first part is the map tab, or I guess the whole thing. We can go over a little bit. So you got all these various tabs that let you do various things to the file that you have open. The first tab is the map tab, basically very similar to in BMS. So I'll just open up BMS, go to the tactical engagement, TE builder. It's very similar. Why is that? So it's not as difficult to see. So it's very similar to this, right? I mean, you got the map tab. You can add squadrons. You can add battalions. You can, view different installations of your choice, right? So in Mission Commander, in the map screen, you can do the same thing, right? So right now we can kind of see everything that's out there. If you want to turn different stuff on and off, you've got your objectives that we can have, or units. So if you want to start seeing more or less objectives, we can turn all of them off. We can also turn off all of our other units as well, just to make the map clean. So now you can see we basically have a blank map that is just, because we're filtering everything off. If we want to start turning stuff on, turning on various objectives, we do have a little bit more control over what we can turn on. So for example, in BMS, in the TE editor, you can either turn on airports or not, whereas here you can turn on air bases or highway strips. Same with air defenses, right? You can either turn air defenses on or off in BMS, but in Mission Commander you can turn on air defenses or you can just turn on radars. You have a little bit more functionality in the turning on and off what you can see on the map. So that's something to keep in mind. But first, just to go over, adding something to the campaign. Just similar to in BMS, you basically go to whatever it is that you want to do. So here's Kunsan. If you want to add a squadron, you can right click on it, go ahead and add squadron. And basically then you can pick from the list what type of aircraft you want to fly out of that. And you can also pick what side it's on. Typically you wouldn't want to put a red side aircraft at a blue base, but you can do like US, make it US if you wanted to, an ally, for example. You also then change the squadron number. You can also pick the patch. 72nd stuff is up in the 220 range. So 221 is the 72nd patch, the original one. Back when BMS first came out, we submitted all of our patches, so they incorporated it into the sim. So 221 is the 72nd, 219 is 47th, 222 is the 87th, and 223 is the 55th, and 224 is the 617th. So you can put whatever aircrafts you want, or squadrons, I should say, at the air bases of your choice, just like you can in the BMS editor. Battalions, basically it's done the same way. Whatever objective you want to have on, we can then right click on that objective. Basically then we can add a battalion, and you can pick what type of battalion you want it to be. And again, you can pick the name of the battalion. You can set up divisions as well, and also give it orders if you wanted to, kind of reserve at that location, defend, or do other actions when that campaign starts. This stuff down here is just filtering on the mini map that comes up when you're adding. So these don't really mean anything. But then you can also see the units that are included in that battalion that you're adding. So again, very similar to the BMS. It's just adding squadrons, battalions, whatever it is that you want as you're creating that TE, or I call it TE because it is essentially a tactical engagement, but using the campaign engine. And then task forces as well. So naval units, we can add those just in the water. So you just add a task force, and then you can pick what kind of naval unit you want to put at that location. And then the last part on the map is you can set ownership of individual objectives. So in BMS, if we want to change ownership of various parts of the land, we can go up into the which one is it? Teams, I think it is, and then you can paint whatever color it is you want to occupy. But it's very coarse, right? Basically, you can only do a size that small, right? Or you gotta come in and try to make the location that you're trying to make a certain side very small. You can't pick individual locations. But in Mission Commander, you can come and, if you want to make 2-1 Airbase part of a different team, you can right click on it, edit it, and you can set the owner, first owner and current owner. And I think you can also do it here and set owner, and you can just set the first and the current owner as well. So that way you don't have to make a full area one side. You can pick individual objectives. So for example, in the 72nd World, we have just Kotar Range, for example, as that red side. So that way when we're doing engagements at Kotar, we're not getting dereliction of duty for hitting friendly units. So that's how we're able to do that, is through Mission Commander setting that individual objective to be on the red side, similar to where we have the tank battalions over in MOA. I think it's 3. Again, where that tank battalion is, it's on the red side, so that way we're not getting any hits on our logbook as we're doing missions in the 72nd World on the blue side training type of missions. So that's kind of the map tab. Before we go to the next tab, does anybody have any questions on the map tab? Again, with the filtering, there's the objectives that you can filter. If the units as well, you can turn on various ones that you want to see, and so on and so forth. So it's basically just lets you kind of see what's in the file that you're working on. So any questions before we go to the next tab? All right, the next tab is the campaign tab. Basically, there's not too much in here that gets modified. It kind of shows you some airbase stuff. The biggest thing in here is the date. This kind of lets you set your current time of the file that you're working on, the start time, and also the end time. So for 72nd World, we've got it set to 7 days because we let it run for 7-day periods. So we had to bump up the end time to be up at day 8 essentially. So that's where you can kind of set the time of the file that you're working on. The other important thing in here is the shift times, and basically lets you shift the times of everything in the file that you're working on. So basically, if you have flights fragged, for example, at 4 a.m., or let's say you have flights fragged at 8 a.m., and you want to make it into a night mission, rather than having to go in and change all of your flight times from 8 a.m. to say 8 p.m. in order to make it a night mission, you can come in here, shift times 12 hours. It'll shift the times of all flights in the campaign to 12 hours later, to turn it into a night mission rather than having to rebuild everything. So it's a nice, nifty way to do that. The other thing in here is the miscellaneous tab that is used. Basically, you can set the player squad, which is essentially when you join what squadron you're coming into by default. Don't really use that too much, but just thought I'd point that out. And then the other thing is the occupation map. So basically similar to BMS editor, this is where you can actually paint the area if you wanted to paint the sides, as opposed to having to go into the map and do everything individually, setting owner. Under the occupation map here, you can basically paint it as well, just like in the editor, to set sides. So that is the campaign tab. Of the items that are most commonly used, that I use anyways, in the campaign tab. Any questions on that before we go to the next one? All right, we'll go to the Teams tab next. The Teams tab, basically, again, there's a few tabs of importance that are used. The first one is the info, just kind of info. That's not really what to do. There's some initiative stuff that you can set, but I don't really do much with that. Under the other, there is some of the supply stuff that's in here. So availability, you got your supplies. You can play with this a little bit to change those levels. I haven't really messed with this too much. I'm still working, trying to see what the various values do. As you have probably seen in the 72nd World, whenever we go out there and start hitting battalions and reduce them to say 50%, they'll be fully repaired after maybe an hour or so, or the next time we fly up there a few hours later. I think this is partially to do with that, and so I've been playing with this a little bit to see if changing these values make it so that way. Okay, if we take something down to 50%, maybe it's not the next hour that it's fully 100% again. Maybe it's the next day it'll be back to 100%. To kind of allow more of those planned full day type of missions, if you wanted to start doing something like that, where you have a guy go out and at 8 a.m. in the morning does a SAM strike, and then a guy at 5 p.m. at night does his actual strike on some airbase or something. But right now, it's kind of you kind of have to do all that at once because of how quickly everything gets resupplied. So that's what the other is right now. You can do some of the supply stuff. You can do set the experience of the teams, and then also the vehicles. And like I said, I haven't really used that. Basically, just to pull down here, you can kind of pick which country you're working on. It's split up by country. One thing to note is if you do make a change, you do have to hit apply first in order for that to take effect. If you just make a change and then save it up here in the top right, the change that you made won't take effect. You have to make sure you hit the apply first. And that's also the same back here on the time. If you start changing your time and then you just save it without applying it, it won't take effect. You have to make sure that you change your time, shift your times, whatever you're doing, hit apply change, and then save the mission file. So yeah, I should have pointed that out on the campaign tab earlier. Next one is the relations tab. This is one that I like to play with as well. This is where you kind of set up the relations of the various countries in the campaign. So basically, in the 72nd World, for example, we can take a look at DPRK first of all. So you can see that DPRK is, so for DPRK is allied with himself, obviously, but he's friendly with PRC, which I believe is China, and CIS, which is Russia. So DPRK is friendly with them, so that means Russian and Chinese aircraft can fly through DPRK airspace without being fired upon, right? And also DPRK is neutral to Japan and at war with the ROK. And then neutral with the U.S., but because the U.S. is allied with ROK, that's why DPRK is hostile to or at war with the U.S. as well. So then if we look at PRC, for example, which we said was China, you can see for 72nd World, we have China again. It's friendly with DPRK, so that means DPRK can fly up to China without getting shot at, and China can fly through DPRK without getting shot at. But you can also see that China is neutral to the U.S. and neutral to ROK. That means China can basically fly anywhere and not be shot at. They're kind of neutral to everybody. So that's kind of how I like to put.
What's the difference between allied and friendly?
So basically, for example, here, allied and friendly. So I've done some testing, not with allied and friendly, but I've done some testing with at war and hostile, and I didn't see a difference between at war and hostile. Neutral was where it made a difference. So I have a feeling allied and friendly, it doesn't really make a difference when it comes to getting a declare from AWACS. Basically, you're going to get a declare from AWACS, and it's going to come back friendly if it's allied or friendly. It's going to come back hostile if it's at war or hostile. It's only when it's neutral does it change to basically not being a hostile aircraft anymore. So not really answering your question, but partially.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
If you have a friendly or an allied, say ROK is friendly or an allied, and they have a tanker squadron, we can actually refuel on that tanker squadron.
Yes. So for example, Japan is allied with the U.S. And therefore Japan does have tankers that it is supplying to us to refuel that. So not in the current version of the 72nd World, but in the next version that's coming out, it's basically each country has its own tanker. The U.S. has a tanker, South Korea has a tanker, and Japan has a tanker. And Japan's supplying one of those tankers to to us to use. The one thing to note about that, which I find kind of weird, is that you don't see it on the map. So even though it's there, you won't see it on the radar map. You can't look at it in the ATO. You just have to know that it's there. So it's one thing to keep in mind about that. So that's the relations. The other thing that can be done here is there's some team flags. Basically, team is active. I think you have to make sure that's set. I think if you were to modify a default, your standard save 0, for example, China and Russia are not active because in the initial phases of the war, they're not really part of it. So just keep that in mind. There's also the team has stats. I'm not really sure what that is. Oh, sorry, SATs is satellites. That basically says that the team has the satellites um, to help them. I think recon the area and get more updated intel is what that checkbox is. As far as team updated, I'm not sure what that is. Team player prio, I'm not sure what that is, and the team member has SATs. I'm assuming that if there's a member basically of that team, then they gain the benefits of those satellites as well somehow. But like I said, the main thing that I use this relationship is to kind of make other countries be neutral to ROK and the US and whatnot. Any other questions other than the ones that came up already on the relations tab? All right, go to the stats tab. Basically, stats again. This is to do with the the stats that the team is starting with. So again, to do with the resupply level and whatnot. So playing with this a little bit to try and make it not resupply them as quickly, but basically setting what the current stats are and the starting stats are. One thing to keep in mind about this, if you're not doing it in the save 0, so let's say you're doing it in a save file that you've already saved, the starting stats are already set and you can't change those. So basically you can change your current stats obviously, but then resupplies will still obviously come and change those current stats. So just keep that in mind. Next one is the bonus. I think this is essentially the I don't know if it's something to do with the scoring system or if it's to do with the priorities on the types of missions that are happening. It makes me think that it's not, but it's hard to say. So I don't really mess with this. I mostly do the types of missions in the sliders once the campaign started, and then save it that way. But there's this here that you can set to whatever you want. Still need to find some more information about that. The last thing on the teams is the action. So also here I've messed with this a little bit in the world, trying to make it, since the whole objective of the 72nd World is not so much to have a typical campaign where, there's an actual war going on. It's kind of present day with North Korea doing their thing and South Korea doing their thing. We have a lot of training spots. South, the North Korea doesn't come down and strike us too much. So using this to kind of keep them at whatever we want, right? Ground, action, defensive, so that way they're not, moving their troops south of the Flot, and air action, so that way they're not coming and doing strike missions, and they're not doing sweeps down south of the Flot. Is essentially, modifying this is hopefully what changes and affects that. So that's the team tab of the items that typically use when for modifying the world. Any questions on the team tab? All right, next one we're going to go to, well, the next one in the list is skip the units for a second, come back to that one. That's a big one. You can jump to the objectives real quick. So this is one of the ones that if you're working the save X, that you can only modify this one, as you can see right here. So it's only available for the save X. What the objectives are, basically, I can't really explain what the objectives are in detail, but what they're used for in the world, in the 72nd World, is essentially for the tankers, or sorry, the carriers. If you want to have squadrons at an aircraft carrier, you have to make sure that it has an objective set up. So in KTO, the Kunetsov carrier is not in the database properly, I guess. So we can't actually have red aircraft flying off of the Kunetsov carrier. So we actually had to set up the Connie and the Midway, which are U.S. aircraft carriers, but set their teams to be DPRK. And then we could add squadrons, red squadrons, to those carriers, which is in the next version of But that's what the objectives is used for, is for setting up carriers. And I'm sure there's obviously other stuff that it could be used for air bases and what to put squadrons at. But for what I've used it so far for, it's just for setting up carriers, that way we can have squadrons coming off of carriers. Any questions on that? It's one of those things that once you actually, if you try to do it, you'll kind of understand it, and you can come back and watch the video. It might make a little bit more sense then. Let me just fix one thing. We're about to run out of space. All right. So the next one is going to go back to the units. So here are the units list. Essentially, this is, you can think of this as the ATO, but kind of showing everything. So it's kind of like the OB and the ATO together. Basically, a list of all the units that are created in the file that you're working on. So you can filter it by the countries, which helps find certain things that you want. You can also filter it by flights, packages, and squadrons for air units, and also for battalions and brigades for ground units, and also task forces. So typically, or for what I do it for, all the land units I would create on the map screen, right? So we don't really need to do much with the units, with the land units in the map screen. But the air units I don't create those on the map screen. The squadrons we create, but we don't create the actual unit, the air units themselves. And even here, I don't create any flights or anything in Mission Commander. So basically, the way that it is done is kind of go through that, I guess, would be the best thing. So to filter stuff first, you just hit the button and it'll filter it. Pull down whatever country you want it to be on, and then you can kind of see the flights that are created for, in this case, U.S. So that's kind of what it does there. So to create flights, typically I'd set everything up, all your squadrons, all the battalions and whatnot, and then I would open up the file in BMS and basically, just create the units as you normally would. So let's just go ahead and create a new campaign file for this. This is actually the next version 2 of the 72nd World. So we just create a file, whatever. We'll save it as MC Class. So in this case, this is basically, let's say there weren't any flights created yet. So we just save the campaign, go to flag whatever flights you want to flag for the world. So what I do for the world is I create a bunch of air traffic that you guys have probably seen as you're flying around, to try to simulate commercial air traffic. And those are the C-130, or what are they? The drawing a blank on the aircraft type. It's the
141s.
Yeah, 141 Starlifters is what I kind of put in as the commercial traffic, and basically set them on a specific flight plan and flying these flight routes. So I'd come in here and create those, create one of them, I should say, and that's it, right? And same for the AWACS and the tanker. So if there's AWACS, for one of the tankers, basically I'd come in here, create a tanker. So let's just create one for fun, real quick. And of course it would not let me put it in. There you go. So let's just put one in. Normally, we'd modify this flight path, but for this example, we're not going to. So we could put it in here and, do whatever you want to do with your steer points, just like as if you were in the TE editor. The only difference is we're actually in a live campaign. So there is a little bit of more restrictions on what you can do. So for example, in the TE editor, you can it's a little bit easier to create flights in the TE editor, I should say. There's not as many restrictions. So when you're in the campaign creating flights, if there's not enough pilots, for example, it's not going to let you create the flight. If your takeoff time isn't set up properly, it's not going to let you create that flight. Whereas in the TE editor, you can. It doesn't care if the flight's already starting in the air. So just keep that in mind. But as long as you know how to create the flights in the online campaign, you can create them for your mission as well. So then you move your steer points around however you want to do it. And then you just save your file again. So we called this what, MC Class. So we'll save that again. So then you create all your flights or whatever. Then you go back to Mission Commander. So now we're gonna go. So we were in our save 0. Now we're gonna go and open up the MC Class campaign. So here it is here. So it goes ahead and opens that up. You can filter again by flights, and we can probably find one of our flights that we created. It is probably this guy right here. I think we made it for 603, if I'm mistaken. So then, you'd see that flight that you created or all the flights that you created, and then you can go in and modify them. So if you wanted to modify it, you can. No, it's potentially a little bit harder to find in here, but but regardless, basically there's the flights that you can go ahead and modify. So to edit a flight, basically you can double click on it and it'll pull up the information for that flight. And this is where you can then change your call signs of that flight if you want to have something other than standard Cowboy, Falcon. You can pick something else for that flight's call sign. You can also change the call sign number, so it's not necessarily always 1. Or if you want them to be 1, you can make them 1. You can do that, and then also what you can do is shift the individual times of that flight if you wanted to. So back in the campaign under the time, you can shift all times of everything in the campaign or in the file that you're working on. In the units, you can shift the times of individual flights, which is important, as you will see in a little bit. But yeah, you can come in here, shift it by days, hours, minutes, seconds, whatever you want to shift it by. You can even adjust your steer point times if you want to, fine tune the steer point times. Because sometimes in the campaign, like I say, when you're creating flights, you're restricted on the times that you can put in because the campaign is not going to let you put in times that it doesn't think are valid. But in here, you can then come in here and modify them. So that way you can make them more accurate to how you actually want stuff to flow. So just keep that in mind. So that was filtering the information, then editing a flight, changing the of aircraft. Oh yeah, that's right. So we can also change the number of aircraft in the flight. So let's say we frag a flight for 4, and we only have 3 people show up. We can come in here and change it down to 3 rather than having the 4 people and having to send the monkey home, for example. So that can be useful if you want to make sure that you don't have problems on takeoff, for example, where everybody's ready to go, but you got a number 4 monkey, and he, you guys are going to take off, say, 10 minutes early. Well, that number 4 is going to hold up everybody else behind him. Whereas if you have the proper number of aircraft, then you don't have that problem. So I'll let you change the number of the aircraft, the call sign number, and then you can also shift the individual flight times. So we'll come back to this here in a second, just to touch on the battalions real quick. You can come in here and edit a battalion as well if you want to. So for example, you can come into the battalion by double clicking on it. Again, you can change the name, change its division, supply, and whatnot. But one thing to note about the supply is that it's going to get reset when the resupply happens, depending on the supply level, based upon some of the other supply stuff we talked about before. So just just because you set this to say 50% doesn't mean it's always going to be 50%. When the next resupply happens, something's going to change. And that also goes for the units as well. So I'm actually going to go to a red side unit since I'm a little more familiar with it. But so here, for example, we can change the number of units that are in that battalion. So if we wanted to have an SA6 out there, for example, we don't want it to kill everybody, but we want it to kind of make them, have to respect that threat. We could get rid of all the SA6 launchers, for example, and just have the straight flush. So now they're going to get, radar locked by that SA6 radar, but it's not going to be able to launch on them because it doesn't have any launchers. So it's, just another way to, create the missions that you are creating by having threats out there, but they're a perceived threat as opposed to an actual threat, which is good. One thing to keep in mind about this, though, also is that it doesn't work for long-term missions. So at a resupply, when the campaign resupplies itself, it will resupply it back to the full size of it, depending on its supply level and whatnot, how long it will take. So just keep that in mind. It is definitely good for small missions that we do. Let's say we do an LFE or something, or an open flight night. You can set the number of units in that battalion down lower, so that way for that individual 2-hour time period, it won't have any launchers. But for the 72nd World, for example, it's not as useful because that resupply happens and then they just get resupplied anyways. So it doesn't really help to change it. So that's the one or the few things about editing the battalion. Like I say, the name, and then the number of them. And the other thing is the spotting and unspotting. So you can unspot the battalion as well. So in the campaign engine, for an SA6, it is a mobile unit. We can unspot it. So that way, now nobody will be able to see it on the map when they connect in that online scenario. With a TE, even if you come in here and you're editing a TE file, if you unspot it, it will still be visible when everybody joins that TE in the online environment. I don't know if it's a bug. I mean, you can call it a bug, I guess, with the TE where that just doesn't work. But in the campaign it does, and that's one of the reasons I think we should, as a wing, try to move towards building everything in a campaign, not in the TE, just that way that we do have more flexibility and it's not as predictable of a world that we're flying in. Although, maybe sometimes you do want to have that predictability for training purposes, in which case, that's fine to use the TE. Or you can still use a campaign, just have them spotted. So yeah, that's the battalion. Anything on the battalion before I move on to squadrons? All right, so then the last part is the squadrons. So we can come back to, I guess US is fine. So we come to squadrons. So again, we can, modify squadrons similar to how we did flights and battalions. You can double click on squadron and basically have, stuff that you can modify. Again, you can change the patch just like when you created it. So if you made a mistake when you created it in the map, you can just come in here, modify it. You can move that squadron to different air bases if you want it. If you want to relocate that squadron, you can also change the aircraft type. Although I haven't really done this too much. I'd rather just delete it and move it to the airbase as opposed to doing it through here, or deleting it and adding the new type of aircraft properly as opposed to changing one. But you can change the name of it as well, and you can also change the number of aircraft in that squadron. But again, this is going to be affected by the resupply again. So basically that squadron would be resupplied to whatever the max is. And these max values, I believe, are set up in the database of Falcon. So, we could go into the database and modify that. The problem would be that it could cause multiplayer incompatibility issues. So we don't want to change. We don't want to go in the database and do that. We can definitely change the current amount, but like I say, it will just get modified by the resupply. The other thing is the munitions again. So similarly, we could reduce the quantity of the munitions that a squadron has, but at resupply it'll get resupplied. And then the other thing is the schedule. And sometimes this helps a little bit if you're actually in your campaign and you're having problems fragging flights. You can clear the usage, and that will allow you to start fragging flights again. if for some reason that squadron has been overutilized. But I mean, you don't want to do it too much because it's kind of unrealistic, right? I mean, Falcon's trying to limit the readiness of a squadron if it's trying to be overutilized. But you know, for small TEs and stuff, if you're having problems fragging stuff, you can come in here and clear the schedule to make it to hopefully be able to then frag your flights that you're trying to create for your mission. So that's the squadron. So we went over the name. We talked about the patch already, I guess. How we can change the patch here. Aircraft type, we talked about moving it. The roster stores and schedule we talked about. Oh yeah, and then just like in the sim, under the squadrons, if I go to the right location. So if we go to one of the squadrons, we have the set by HQ here, basically which will allow the HQ to frag flights automatically with the engine. You can set that here as well and unset it so that way that it's being set or not set by the campaign engine. Something to keep in mind. And then lastly, in this section, which is I think one of the more important parts, is under the advanced. So we're going to go ahead and close this. Actually, we'll keep this. So under the advanced, basically we have a few options. There's the export units, the import units, and the delete all units. So if you are starting from your base save X file, now normally there's thousands and thousands of units in your starting base save X file, save 0 file, whatever it is that you're using, and you want to basically start from scratch, you can come into the advanced options, delete all units, and now boom, there is no units in here anymore. All right, so even if we turn on all of our units, all right, you'll see that there is nothing in here anymore. This is a totally blank campaign with no units. And then you
you did. Quick question: you did that through the export unit tab?
No, just delete. So advanced and then delete.
Okay.
All right, so I just deleted all units in the file that you have open. So I'm not going to save this because I don't want to obviously do that. So I'm just going to close out real quick and I'll open it back up. So that's how you create a starting point, and that's kind of how the 7-second world was created. It took that save 0 file, went in there, delete all units, and then started adding, my squadrons, adding the battalions that I wanted, and then opened it up in the BMS and started creating the flights that I wanted, and then save that, open that back up in Mission Commander, and then started modifying those flights, creating, copying those flights. So for example, we'll go ahead and open up that file again. Although what I should say is I'll open up one of these ones real quick. So essentially this would be like a saved copy of the starting point campaign, the save 0. This is a saved copy of it once I've gone into it and created those flights. All right. So in this file, there's flights already created. So if I come over to the units, come to the flights, I've created some of these flights. Now, the 7-second world runs for 7 days. So we need to have 7 days of these flights. So how do we create 7 days of these flights? Well, basically we right click on it, we clone that flight, and we're going to, it's going to create a new package for it. So then once that flight has been cloned, we can double click on it and we can increase its time and shift its time. So that first AWACS, he was taking off at 5:58. He was on station at what? 6:04 or 6:05-ish, it looks like. And he's on station for how long? Basically 6 until 11. Right, so 5 hours. So this guy, the second one, he can come on station 5 hours later. So I can shift him 5 hours, go, apply. So now the first AWACS is on station from 6 o'clock until 11:14 until 11:14-ish, depending on the steer points. This guy is on now from 11:15 until 1600, and basically that's what you do. That's what I do, is keep cloning and shifting until I have 7 days worth of flights for all the various types of flights that are in the 72nd world. AWACS, tankers, any special types of missions we got going on, all the com air traffic. Basically, if we go to ROK, we can see these are all the initial flights of those com air traffic, and basically this would get cloned like 100 and something times, shifted X number of hours. That way, every hour there's this com air traffic flying this path that has been defined. So that's how that's created. Like I say, from deleting it and then creating the first one, like we talked about. Now the next point that's important is the exporting and importing. All right. So basically, let's say I've got all this stuff created, and I want to, save it for later. I can export all my units, and then I can have a totally different file, and I can import all those units into that same file. Now, this is just an overwrite, so it's very similar to if you do a copy paste of the campaign, or you back up those campaign files. Essentially, it's the same thing as opening it up, right? It's all the same stuff there, but it does let you keep some of your base information, such as all your team relations and whatnot, and occupation map that you might have. It lets you keep all that stuff. The other important part is, let's say you're used to the TE editor in BMS, right? So in BMS, you like using the TE editor. Let's go to it real quick. And you like creating all your missions in here. That's fine. You can create your missions, do whatever you want to do in here. You can save it. You can come to Mission Commander. You can open up that TE that you saved. So whatever you want to call it. Let's open up one of my test ones. And now you can export those units. So let's just call it test. And now we can open up a save 0. All right, and we'll delete all the units. And we really don't have to delete them. We could just import the new ones. But I'm just going to go delete them all and then save this as something else. Although with it being a save 0, you can't really save. So I should. I'm not going to save this, but what we can do is then import that test units from a TE, and now that TE is in the campaign engine, right? You've built it in the TE editor, and now we've saved those units, and we've imported them into the campaign engine. And now you're essentially in the campaign engine. So if you have stuff that you like to build in the TE, then you can simply bring it in here, and then you can save it, and fly it as a campaign as opposed to flying a TE, which then would allow you to hide some of those battalions, give you a little bit more editing abilities in that campaign.
So that import function would not overlay any of the 7-day scheduling you've already put into the campaign.
No, unfortunately, it does not. They can't append to it currently. I've asked to see if they could do that, but so far, it's not something that they are able to do. So it's just a straight up, whatever units are in that file, it's bringing them all in.
And those are the only units that you'd have, right?
Those are the only units that you would have. That's correct.
Okay.
but it's still useful a little bit. So for example, I do have, or I'm going to have, and I kind of do have, I should say. If we come back here, let's say we do an import. So I kind of have, 1 day's worth of flights. So I do want to distribute this, and essentially it's a day's worth of all the comm traffic that's out there that I've already took the time and created, copying and cloning and increasing the time to last for at least 1 day, because 1 day would be enough for us to use for LFEs and open flight nights. So that way you have all that base information with the tanker at the tanker locations that we're used to from the 72nd World. The AWACS is already up. And then you can basically start creating your open flight nights or your LFEs starting from that file that has all of those units already created. And then you can just add to it, adding your battalions that you want to add to it, adding any additional squadrons that you want to have, that mission flying out of, and creating your flights as well on once you have that file in as a starting point, as opposed to a blank file being the starting point.
Sure, and you could run probably multiple squadron flight nights off that, doing a 24-hour operation type deal.
Well, that's what the 72nd World is on a seven-day
Right.
schedule, right? And so that's already kind of there and built in. That's what the 72nd World is for, essentially, is that way it's there to, have guys, go up and we know what's there. It's kind of today's operation, right? I mean, it was Sandman that had the idea, that thought it would be a good idea to do, and we kind of ran with it, and that's kind of where we are now. But that's kind of the basics of the mission commander that I use it for. Hopefully it gives you some information on its use, and makes you think of other ways of creating missions than just the TE editor, which, like I say, you are limited in what you can do. So any other questions before we wrap this thing up and go fly?
Yes.
What's that?
But can you mute your whatever's making that echo?
It's not me. Oh, maybe it is me.
It is you.
You should have told me sooner. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Easier to listen to now. Okay. So the save 0 file, right? If you overwrite that and save that, then every time you create a campaign in the campaign in BMS, it's going to have those settings. Is that correct?
That's correct. But so save 0 is rolling fire, for example.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's a save 1 file right there, right?
This is save 0. Rolling fire is save 0.
Okay, so that's the save 0. So if I went and updated my save 0 file, every time I created a new rolling fire, it would have those settings.
That's correct. For example, right now, this is the 72nd World. The next version of the 72nd World is my rolling fire, and that's what this is. So if I come in here and do this, this essentially is 72nd World. It doesn't save your priorities and stuff. For some reason. So you have to come in here and change everything. But yeah, essentially this is the that file that you've modified. That's why it's important to back it up.
Okay, that was my next comment, was going to be for everybody to make sure they have a backup of those in case they want to go back to the default settings. Now, let me ask you this: what's the benefit of doing that? Why wouldn't we just go in here, create a rolling fire from the original save 0, and then saving that campaign name as whatever we want? Let's say MC Class, and then going into the MC and updating all that instead of into the save 0 file itself.
All right. So we did touch on that. Does anybody remember what the answer was? Test time.
I probably had stepped away.
So the problem with that, it's not a problem. It's just that there is a few limitations in Mission Commander that are only able to be done on the save 0 file. So for example, the objectives can only be modified in the save 0 file. Some of the stats on supply levels and such can only it seems like it only takes effect in the save zero file. If you do it on a campaign that's already been started, it's like those don't take effect. So yeah, you can do that, and that's essentially how it is done, or should be done from a if you're just creating like a LFE or a open flight night, that's how it should be done. But you may want to use that save X if you want to do some more advanced type of editing.
Yeah, like the creating the carriers for the
Exactly.
red side. So that's because I had a
Exactly.
problem with that before. It wasn't working when I was trying to update the carrier stuff, and it was because it wasn't the SaveX file.
Exactly.
I gotcha. Okay, that's kind of my questions.
Anything else? Anybody else?
There was a couple things I wanted to touch on in the units in the air stuff. If you could go back to that real quick. I'm not sure if this was touched on. If you go to packages, did you talk about the packages at all?
I didn't. I don't really do much with the packages in Mission Commander, but we can discuss them if you want.
Yeah, so basically in here, if we just grab a package, open it up, let's say that's have multiple flights in here, you can actually take out of the package and basically get rid of one of the flights. So let's say we created a mission and we got 5 flights in the package, but we don't have the numbers for it, so we don't want to go in and just delete that while everybody's in there. While everybody's connected or whatever, we can go in here and just delete one of the flights out of the package and save it, and then bring that campaign up. Because sometimes if we do it in BMS, it creates a problem, and then just it's kind of a BMSism, I guess. But you can also shift the times as you see here per package as well. So that way you're not shifting. You don't have to go to each flight and shift the times. You can go to the whole package and shift the time.
That's right.
So that's another thing that's in here. Can you just open up one of the flights for me real quick? All right. So you've already discussed the shift in there. You can actually change the mission type. I don't know if you just talked about that at all. You can change that in that drop down down below on the left.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in here that can be modified, your fuels and whatnot, even though I think it gets reset back to the full fuel in the sim. But yeah.
Yeah, one other thing I did want to talk about, just to straighten up, if you are creating a tanker flight, make sure it's set as a tanker, not as a training. I know he was just doing it as an example, but if you set a tanker flight to be as anything other than tanking operations, he won't give you fuel. Just the same as with AWACS and stuff like that. If you set them up as anything but what you want them to be, they won't give you that, provide those services for you as well. That's pretty much it. That's all I had.
All right. Anybody else? All right. If not, that's that's basically it. If you have any questions as you're going through it, just shoot me a message or hit me up, and we can work through it. Also, the mission commander, it was done by Falcus. I'm sure he put a lot of work into it. So yeah, definitely want to thank him for putting it together to allow us to make modifications and missions like this.
Thanks, Zeke. Good class.
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
so
you.
I expect missions from everybody in, let's say, December